Oh, greetings again. This is Silly Kelly. I was going over stuff about stuff about different things, reviews and things like that. That Nostalgia Critic discussed, they probably wouldn't go into. And another thing, there was Mac and Me, but I think I've already done that. I'm not gonna do that. If there's some reason to do that at some point. But what, since we're kind of doing cyberpunk, why not go into Blade Runner? Because there's a new Blade Runner movie coming out. I think I've reviewed this movie, so this is more of a look back at the concepts of Blade Runner and why a new generation person in the audience, and probably some other ones, were confused as to what was going on in Blade Runner. And one of them was like, oh, just like that. It was during their narrative. And they were talking about movies they didn't like or did like that other people conversely liked or didn't. Yeah. So, Blade Runner. Blade Runner is a 1984 movie about a noirist future in which the Harrison Ford character is a cop, sort of film noir cop, early cyberpunk cop. It's a genre movie, science fiction, fantasy, and it is a cult classic because when it was released in the 80s, it did not make a lot of money. It's only through the releases on DVD and the mystery of what the unicorn was about, the mystery of what the dialogue was about in the beginning and the end, and how the director studio interference had messed with this movie. It's quite a lot of it actually. The studio apparently changed the beginning and the ending and kind of butchered it like they did Brazil, which is another cyberpunky kind of movie in the same time period. And I think I did a review of Brazil. But yeah, that was Terry Gilliam. This was Ridley Scott. This was the classic director Ridley Scott, who did Alien a little bit earlier and went on to do Blade Runner. It's a movie, if you don't understand it, and I can see how some of them might not. The millennial that asked the question, was confused about it, was probably 22 or 23. So he watched it and he's like, I've seen all these other movies that it's similar to, and it's ripping off The Matrix or whatever. It's ripping off this other thing, and it's ripping off noir things and whatever. It's not though, because like the millennial, it's not ripping off those other movies. Those other movies are ripping off it. Yes, that's but is it necessarily a ripoff or not? I think it came out in '84, so contextually, if anything, movies like Ghost in the Shell, which came out in '94 or '5, then you got The Matrix, which came out in '99, the reboot cartoon that I just discussed, 94 to '99, stuff like that. It's all afterward. Akira is '87, so all that stuff is after Blade Runner. Chronologically, Blade Runner is right there in the 80s. So it's like, oh, it's not a ripoff. This is the first movie to have done it. That's right. Sort of like when they said, oh, the thing with the wizards and the thing and all that, the millennials freaking out over the new Lord of the Rings movies. Some of them going like, oh, isn't that like Star Wars, the hero's journey like Star Wars? Actually, Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, Star Wars was 77, and Lord of the Rings came by much later. However, Lucas is definitely influenced by Tolkien. And Tolkien was writing in the 40s, the 1940s. So the elements of the hero's journey that he was also doing Joseph Campbell, and there's been many things on Star Wars. But the point was that no, Lord of the Rings is not ripping off Star Wars with wizards and magic and stuff and space ninja wizards and stuff. It's the same genre from which people like Lucas took their ideas, in a sense, the hero's journey, the whole thing. Joseph Campbell and this other guy were also, and Narnia, with C.S. Lewis, were all 30s and 40s and 50s, and then 30s, 40s, and 50s serials of that time period. 80 years ago. That was what they did. And yeah, all these movies are what we call a genre. So it's not a ripoff, it's a genre. Noir, film noir, which means literally black movie, black film. It's not racial, it's just that it's dark. It's a dark film. Now, Blade Runner owes its past, like I said, with the Star Wars, Joseph Campbell, and the Hidden Fortress, Murasaki's Hidden Fortress, samurai movies, old Buck Rogers serials. And also, Tolkien watched those same old serials. So he's like, yeah, of course I would put that in my books, which then could be made a movie. So yeah, The Lord of the Rings is basically, it was a cartoon in the 70s. That's where I got that. Before Lucas. So, before Lucas. So yeah, Blade Runner is not a ripoff of The Matrix. Blade Runner, The Matrix was inspired by Akira and also Ghost in the Shell, and it was inspired by this film noir, little-known film noir movie called Blade Runner. The Matrix is a ripoff. It's a pastiche. It's a mismatch of these other movies that the Wachowski siblings liked. So, okay, there's no ripoff going on. Now, if anything, also the concept of having them be like replicant robots, that's been around since Buck Rogers and stuff as well. Buck Rogers, the 1930s. The very first science fiction movie ever was, you must find this if you're a film school buff, you must find Metropolis. Yes, they might think, oh, but they're ripping off Superman. Oh, it's the other way around. This movie came out way before Superman did. Metropolis is about a society run by machines, where there is a robot who is built to infiltrate the world run by machines, and the robot goes in there and leads a workers' revolt. It's 1930s, it was silent, just had music. It's the first science fiction movie ever. And they would say, oh, that's a ripoff, because they don't know the context. They would see that and go, wait a minute, that robot lady looks kind of like C-3PO. Really does. Where do you think Lucas got it from? He watched Metropolis. He was like, oh, that's this old silent movie. It's really cool. From his childhood, he watched that, and he's like, yeah, I want to do a movie with a robot that looks like that in the face. Walking around. So C-3PO. So it's not a ripoff, it's the other way around. Also, Metropolis is the first film noir science fiction movie. It's also a Peasants' Revolt movie. Ooh. And Terry Gilliam's Brazil is very much a kindred cousin of Metropolis. And Metropolis is the early 30s, so it predates Superman. And of course, that name, Metropolis, that sounds really good. Yeah, that's cool. Let's use that. And the guy doing Superman is like, yeah, I'm going to use that. So he called the city Metropolis. Of course he did. So yeah, it's not a ripoff. It's the other way around. Yeah, film noir. Film noir was also very common with detective potboiler mysteries. The other genre at the time that was being developed was the serial mystery thing, partly on the radio, because they didn't have TVs back then. There was the radios, or you go to the picture show and you watch the pictures. You know, grandparents and parents way back watch that stuff. It was a radio thing. So the film noir, so they would have these movie serials where, you know, the Spirit or Dick Tracy or something. Yes, long before the 90s movie Dick Tracy, the 30s. The Phantom or the Spirit or something like that. Long before Miller and the works of what you're thinking of, Watchmen or the Sin City. Long before that, way before that guy. This guy was probably the son of someone born then. Anyway, so it's a fascinating history, all that. But the noir comes from, it's a French word, you know, and the French were classic for doing stuff like this. They did all these classic movies, Murder on the Orient Express, which they've made a remake of. Why? kind of thing. Where there would be a detective mystery, and it would be dark, and there would be a detective thing, and there's a murderer somewhere on a train or a building or in a haunted house or something. And the murderer, they have to figure out who did it, who done it. Blade Runner is a who done it. Basically, there's some murders going on. There's a killer in this dystopian future, kind of like what Metropolis would have been if everything had gone to seed. And basically he's a cop who goes in and tries to find out who is killing people. In this version, of course, it's a robot, which might be similar in some way to the work of Ellison and Bradbury, and of course, like the classics. But that's a reason for that too, because Terminator is not an original story. Terminator is taken from a Harlan Ellison story, The Glass Hand, and another one called The Soldier. It's from The Twilight Zone. There was a TV series called The Twilight Zone, predating the 90s remake, and the 80s remake, in the 30s and 40s. That was called Twilight Zone. And two of those stories were about a robot that tried to take over. And his future time travel robot soldier goes from the future to prevent his creation in the past, and therefore stop the timeline from being all messed up. Sounds like Terminator, but it was Soldier, and it was also The Glass Hand, of which Harlan Ellison sued James Cameron a couple of years later after the movie made money. And he's like, wait a minute, you took my idea without permission. So that's why later on in later versions of Terminator, even the Cameron one, they had to say, yeah, based on his story by Harlan Ellison, because they basically took his idea from the Twilight Zone episode. Also, Outer Limits was very noirish with Nimoy and those guys. But yeah, it was basically, yeah, so all these serials and things, it's a genre, it's not a ripoff. And that is basically what it is. The big mystery is just that, is Deckard really a replicant himself as well, or is he not? There are several different versions of the director's cut of this movie. There's like 7 of them. I tend to go with number 5, which speculates that he's just an advanced replicant, which is an interesting idea, and that the unicorn scene is just him having the dream that all of the replicants have about the unicorn. Whatever. The shoulders burning of an Orion part, that was just thrown in there. That was the actor just ad-libbing. But it is a cool idea if Betelgeuse exploded at that point, and you could have had, like, it's a star in the shoulder of Orion. It's a constellation. And could have that, Starfleet's burning in the shoulders of Orion. Probably would be burning out there, because it would be on fire. Okay. But no need to explain that. But Blade Runner 2049 is coming out. Apparently it's an alternate future in the 2019, the original, in which the nuclear war must have happened and messed up everything in the 70s, and that messed up the future. So it's an alternate universe, and film noir, and dark movie. Yeah. So that's what's going on with Blade Runner. There have been lots of discussions about it. I'm sure there's a better one out there. But Blade Runner basically was an attempt to get back to the roots of those film noir things, but also added a fantasy twist, in which was science fiction-y dystopia, which they also loved in the 80s. A dystopian movie. Because you can't have a utopia, it always ends up turning into a dystopia. Yeah. Because otherwise, it's not interesting, everything's perfect. Now, they have done, Belgian critic, I think, did do Demolition Man, which is another dystopia movie where the utopia is just bizarre and seamy on the inside. And yeah, that one was fun, but also recently discovered that Aliens was originally Starship Troopers, but they sort of changed it around. They later made Starship Troopers. But yeah, they go to fight the bugs and all that. But that's one of the rumors. But Starship Troopers was also a dystopia in which the society is doing its thing, but not film noir. It's just dystopia, and they're like a fascist society that's taken over, whatever. So Blade Runner was not that popular when it first came out. Blade Runner was cult classic, as they call it now, cult classic. I could see how somebody in their early 20s wouldn't even get it and would think it derivative just because they wouldn't know that there isn't anything earlier. Sort of like those Tamara's never seen videos where she's obviously 25 or 26. She's never seen any of those films. But yeah, yeah, I don't know. I saw him at the Fanime. But I do know a lot about the Blade Runner movie. Yeah, so yeah, fun discussion on what the merits of Blade Runner. Yeah, it's not a high action, high concept movie, but then again, a lot of the movies in the 80s kind of weren't. Demolition Man was unique because they were adding some action to it. And I was like, oh, really? Yeah, Terminator and Terminator 2 were, of course, action, but more so the second one. Alien and Aliens. Alien is basically noir, space, haunted house, mystery. They're in a haunted house. There's a monster in the haunted house. But it's a ship in space. But it's a haunted house mystery. Aliens is just an action, like, Rambo-type action movie set in a haunted colony, a haunted house again, but on a planet. Monsters scaring folks, basically. Yeah, Blade Runner is basically a haunted city that's taken over by elements that are monstrous, that basically they gotta send in the cop to stop the monster, defeat him. Okay. Once you understand that, then it's like, oh, okay. Then it makes sense. It looks like the sequel is kind of ignoring most of the last 5 minutes, but that's okay. It was a little confusing to begin with, so I guess a modern noir, when I can think about it, would be District 9, and maybe a little bit of Elysium. But Blomkamp tends to do the same kind of story over and over again, in the sense he tends to decide, I'm going to do yet another apartheid-like message, but I'm going to have it be like, this time it's a robot, it's Chappie, or this time it's a society in space that controls everything, and they're down on the ground and they're suffering because of apartheid. Or there's aliens, and now the next one is, lizard aliens, that's coming out, that's a lizard one. And then it's the same idea, like oppressing society and whatever. It's like, okay, yeah, I guess if you're going to rip off your own stuff, sure, why not? But yeah, The Matrix came much later than those movies. And the Matrix sequels weren't that good. The Matrix original movie, okay, where would that classify as? That's basically an action-adventure movie set to a fantasy element where it's a fish out of water, and he's basically trying to figure out where he is and find his creators and go about doing things. So it's a hero's journey again, but it's slightly more stylized. That's all. There's nothing new under the sun, just new spins on the same thing. At least that's what film teachers have told me. But yeah, there's about 7 good basic plot stories out there, and they keep doing them over and over again. It goes for mystery or science fiction or fantasy or so anyway. So that is my take on that. So yeah, check out Blade Runner again and get the Cliff Notes so you can look through them and watch the movie as a film noir potboiler mystery, but just happens to have robots in it. But then it makes sense. It's like, oh, all right, yeah, yeah. Potboiler mystery. There's a mystery to it, which I figured it out. For 1980 something, it was actually pretty groundbreaking. Even though it is also derivative of a Twilight Zone episode from many years earlier. But then again, so was Terminator, as I said.